So I'm going to get us started right away with our panel. We're calling it, what is the role of technology in enabling a future lifestyle? And of course, what that means right now is a lifestyle that is almost completely online. And obviously, over the coming months and years, we can anticipate it's going to be a lot more online than it was before as we gradually find our way through these difficult circumstances. So I am, as the presenter said, I am a professor at strategy and entrepreneurship at LBS and the deputy dean. Joining me are Arthur Wang, who is the general manager of VMWare in China with 25 years in technology. Arthur, I believe you're joining us from Beijing, is that correct?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes,
well, thank you for joining us. Obviously, it's quite late into the day now. Next is Dr. Chenyang Xu, co-founder of Silicon Valley Future Academy. Long background in tech and venture investing, I believe Siemens venturing among others. And you're joining us from the Silicon Valley, right?
That's correct.
Good. So it's an early start for you. Thank you very much. And finally, Dickie Ke, who's a tech entrepreneur based in Hong Kong. Background in telecoms, Nokia and other places, and also a Sloan Fellow at the London Business School. So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions, linking up really the world of technology to somewhat more of the behavioral aspects of how we are living in today's crazy world. I'm going to ask all three of the panelists an opening question, and feel free, each of you, to spend 3 or 4, 5 minutes answering, because I'm going to ask a fairly meaty question to get us started. And for the audience who are listening, please do feel free to ask questions as we go. We've enabled, as you know, the Q&A function, and I will be looking at your questions as we go, and I will be feeding in your questions to the panelists at the appropriate time. So, to all three of you, the opening question is really, tell us how we see this new lifestyle unfolding in the coming months, and how will the technologies that you are all involved in help us? Perhaps we can go to Arthur first, then Chenyang, then Dickie.
Yes, I think, currently we are, the pandemic, I think the pandemic will change our society deeply and profoundly. For many enterprises, it's not in their original plans. So now, I believe, the pandemic will totally change the mindset of the business strategy decision makers. You will see it will be the trigger for most of the companies to put more attention to the agility, to the, the organization flexibility and the resilience. This capability are not only important in this crisis, actually. Actually the pandemic is just a test. It's a test that you, whether you are ready or not for the uncertainty and rapid change. Actually, even without this crisis, the companies still need to build them to deal with more and more uncertainty in the futures. Many factors lead to greater uncertainty in the future, like technology exponential growth, the knowledge explosions, the political, economic, the conflict, and as well as the blind spot in our visions. So, however, this kind of agility, resilience, and adaptive capability need digital technology as a foundations. In this fight of COVID-19, technology played a very important role. So, for example, the biomedical technologies, intelligent measures of body temperatures, digital infrastructures like the cloud to maintain the business continuities, online education tools for students, logistic and transportation systems. Without them, people even not able to maintain the normal life, not to mention controlling the spread of virus. Technology is not only add convenience to our life during the normal time, but also help increase the agility, resilience, and adaptive capability on our society when we face crisis. You can imagine what will happen if the pandemic took place 20 years ago.
Right.
Actually, the influence of technology on our life has already been significant even before the pandemic. You can check the top 10 company in the past 30 years. You will find the tech company has gradually replaced the energy, the finance, the banking, the companies. Last year, the 7 of the top 10 company in the world were tech company: Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Ali, Tencent. That's a proof, no doubt the technology will permanently change our world. But the pandemic is just the accelerators. This is my thought.
And before we move to Chenyang, not everybody will really know the company VMware. Can you just tell us what VMware does in terms of helping us to make all this technology work?
Yes. Okay. Actually, VMware is one of the company that provide a digital foundation to our customers. We have been transforming ourselves from virtualization solution providers to innovators across the entire digital transformation portfolios. So we believe the software has a power to unlock the new opportunity for everyone's. At VMware, we are helping our customer and streamline the journey to the digital business by not only unlocking the value from today's technology, but also enabling the integration of tomorrow's. Our vision is to build a digital foundation to enable any application on any cloud to delivered by any devices with intrinsic securities. So this is the brief introduction about VMware.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Arthur. Chenyang, let me move over to you. And good morning to you from Silicon Valley. I guess it's still dark there. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on these two questions around the future lifestyle that we're leading and how technology is going to make it hopefully work a whole lot better.
Right. Thank you, Julian, and thanks, Arthur, and for the intro. So I think a lot of people are hoping this will be a V-cycle and rapid rebound, back even a month ago. But I think the people on my network, including myself, and we believe this is not going to end anytime soon until a cure and vaccine can be found. And that's going to be at least a year, even 2 years away, even longer. Now, I believe, obviously, we are now conducting all of our life, digitally, like this event through Zoom, and which was not possible, a few years ago. And now the bandwidth and technology, the video, it's getting to that. We can have a really seamless, interactions. So no matter where we are. But I think because this extended a new way of living, to cope with the COVID-19, by the time the pandemic's over, I think many changes and this new social work habits aided by the latest digital technologies and will be in place because this is a societal habits forming in such a long time. And these, especially, I think many of the shifts that show positive upsides that as a society we have not, accepted because it was not the habit, such as remote meetings and telehealth and online learnings and more. I believe those will go mainstream and those will become permanent. I mean, just take the Zoom as example, right? All the remote work, the shift is actually very massive. It's unprecedented, in our lifetime. And if you look at the Zoom, meeting tools like Zoom, it went from 10 million daily usage, from January, and in 3 months, it kind of skyrocketed to 300 million, right? And this is astounding, just to show you how astounding that is. If you take WeChat, there's another skyrocketing, app we had. WeChat actually took 2 years to go from 10 million daily users to 300 million users, and Zoom did that in 3 months. Right? This is remarkable. So I believe many of these social and work habits, once they are formed, and they will stay with us permanently, even when the in-person meetings, the healthcare, the education, all the other things return. Those things are what we loved before, but I think the new one will stay, and then there will be a whole new world we're living with afterwards.
I mean, if I can just throw in one comment here, I mean, there are so many areas of our lives where we resisted online meetings, right? And of course, we have forced ourselves to do this because we have no choice, and it becomes apparent that a lot of this stuff actually works pretty well. So, I think we are, as you say, we're on the cusp of shifting our default from face-to-face discussions to online meetings, and we almost have to make a case, I suspect, in the future as to why something has to be done face-to-face.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Dickie, could I get your views on these questions, please?
Yeah, I may only have, because I may only have some quick views. Yeah.
Okay.
On one way, I actually agree with Arthur, especially Arthur explaining the acceleration of these video conferencing tools under the pandemic situation.
Yeah.
But I would like to remind us about the technology adoption curve, right? So finally, I think these things are temporary, they will be over. But for any technology, including video conferencing, we have been talking about video conferencing for a long time, right? But this time it accelerates, like Zoom take a couple of months to increase user number from 10 million to 300 million.
Yeah.
But finally, any technology need to follow the technology adoption curve, the bell-shaped curve, right? Yeah.
Yeah, very good. I mean, it is interesting that we take it for granted that a growth from 10 million users to 300 million users or meetings over a few weeks, we take it for granted that this is possible. And of course it has been possible, but it is a huge reminder that the resilience, if you like, of the technological systems that the world has built is actually huge. And no one knew what would happen if you had a 20-fold increase, and yet it's actually worked out just fine. So before we move on, and this is a question we did not discuss in our practice, but I just want your thoughts on it. We are moving towards an online world in which a lot of our day-to-day interactions happen in this way. What are the risks, or what are the worries that you have about the impact of doing our day-to-day meetings online? You know, if you're anything like me, you spend something like 8 or 9 hours a day in front of your laptop computer talking to people. Any thoughts on the problems that might be creating, either on a technological basis or even on a personal or social basis? Maybe, Arthur, I can get your thoughts on that. Oh, hang on, Arthur, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I think the first concern is security. You know, security issue is one the most important things we think we need to solve in the digital world. This is my the thoughts here. Yeah.
Got it. So security is huge, and obviously you and others are experts on how to manage that set of issues. We know that Zoom's had a few problems in this regard. Any thoughts, Chenyang or Dickie, on the more kind of personal or social aspects of this?
Yeah, I mean, just a real quick comment. I think the people now found it so easy to have a conversation through video and without getting in the car or getting on an airplane. In fact, I think after a month about a quiet period, I felt the last few weeks my work become more busier and than even before the pandemic. And so I think that the social aspect is when the blurry line between work and life, and the work is now back in your home, and it's even more so than before. And what kind of social impact in terms of the parents' presence in the home and the impacts to the relationship and to the parenting, all kinds of other mental health issue and social issue could emerge from that. I think society has not learned the new way of how to cope with that properly. I don't think there's a playbook there.
No, there isn't.
That worries me. Yeah.
Dickie, I'll bring you in a second, but a quick comment from me first.
Yes.
I mean,
Okay.
It's quite easy to imagine, to live in a world of lockdown for 6 or 8 weeks, which is basically where most of us are. But what does that look like over 6 months? I mean, no society has ever done that experiment. I mean, literally the only kind of analogy is to people you've locked away in prison, if you see what I mean. So the mental health consequences of this, if it carries on roughly in this way, are very, very hard to predict. Dickie, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have similar views as you. I'm very concerned with the human behavior side of this video conferencing tool.
Yeah.
For me, I prefer to do business face to face, right? If we can, and shake hands, hold shoulders, right? Rather than use these video conferencing tools for 6 months.
Exactly. Yeah. So look, we're going to come back to some of these social issues. I can already see a couple of questions on this, but I'm going to take those towards the end. I want to now move to another important area, which of course you all have expertise in, artificial intelligence. I mean, this has been a hot tech trend, if you like, for, you know, I mean, certainly for the last 4 or 5 years, and arguably way, way back in time. Tell us, each of you, if you would, what are your thoughts about artificial intelligence, both in terms of, you know, what are the most exciting applications in terms of how we use artificial intelligence in our working and our home lives, and what, if anything, is different this time? You know, you can absolutely go back in time 10, 20 years and talk about artificial intelligence back then. What has happened that's made it so exciting this time? Again, shall we go to Arthur first?
Okay, actually, I'm not, you know, the expert of, you know, artificial intelligence, but from my point of view, I think there is another different things here. You know, the people often don't realize the real power of the technology on society at the beginning. And no matter, you know, the artificial intelligence, mobile, and others, initially the technology was often developed for performance and efficiency considerations. So people often fear to predict, you know, the disruptive and profound impact. It's turned that, you know, eventually the technology will often change the way the world operates. For example, we invent a mobile phone because we want to contact others anytime, anywhere. But eventually, mobile phone becomes our interface with the digital world. My point is, technology often changed the industry and our life in unexpected ways, you know, better or worse, you know. But the technology is a neutral, neither good or bad. So it's very important to ensure we use technology in the right way. In the VMware, we firmly support a notion of, you know, the tech for good. We think, you know, this notion should always be in our mind when we develop, when we promote certain technologies. So I think, you know, Chenyang will give more, more views. Yeah.
So Chenyang, this is very much one of your areas of expertise. Tell us a little bit, and give us a couple of examples of where you see the leading edge of artificial intelligence.
You know, I've been in the AI field for 30 years, and my bachelor thesis was 3 layers neural network on 8 computers. But as we all know, you know, AI has come in many waves and all faded away, and the impact has been limited until this wave. You know, why this present wave is so different and so transformative from the last waves? I feel, you know, there are 3 major factors. First, you know, number one is really compute. We know Moore's law that doubles CPU speed every 2 years. This is giving us the wonder of the information economy, information age. But you know, AI in the key computations training, the machine learning, the training now has been doubling every 3.4 months. Every 3.4 months, imagine. And this translates to 300,000x increase just between 2012 and to 2018, according to OpenAI report. And so that's why, you know, it's so transformative. We're accelerating faster than Moore's law, much faster. The second one is the data. You know, we talk about the big data era, you know, cloud, but data now is doubling every 2 years in every industry's, you know, life, right? And with more IoT sensors and faster communication speed, it means more data to train the machine, from user shopping behavior online to patient medical data. And so data, the abundance of the data, explosion of the data, gave the data hungry AI, you know, engine ways to really, you know, improve and really get really good performance. The last one is the third one is the algorithms. And this wave of AI has actually caused widespread use of deep learning, reinforcement learning, and many other new machine learning methods. And compared to the previous generation AI algorithm, those algorithms, when you feed more and more data, the performance peter off. It doesn't continue to improve. But with the deep learning and reinforcement learning, the more data you feed in, you know, the performance keep improving, and it can improve to the boost its performance to the human level performance, and in many applications are beyond actually human performance. And this is making deploying the current wave of AI economically compelling. And so this is where it's very important. And you can see, particularly in the data area, that China, you know, in the previous panel talked about the China, you know, it's a digital economy and this massive data, more population in the country, in the world, has advantage going forward. But in the end, AI is a tool, with other new technology. But with these three factors, the new AI is arriving and it will be the most transformative force we will experience since the birth of internet. And I think we'll find applications in every corner of our life and work. One thing I believe, it's happening now is AI with all the other digital technologies. Actually, it's a shifting information-centric world we have been living in since the last 20, 30 years to what I call the knowledge-centric world in the next 20, 30 years. I'm happy to elaborate that a little bit more later in later questions.
And just one follow-up question to you. I mean, we're still in the world of what's often called narrow artificial intelligence, aren't we? Where the AI is really good at doing one thing, let's say voice recognition, but of course it's kind of hopeless at doing anything beyond that. How do AI researchers think about that shift from sort of narrow artificial intelligence to the general intelligence of a human? I mean, is this going to happen in our lifetimes, or are we just going to get more and better narrow AIs?
I think that's a very good question, Julian. I think the consensus in the field is actually very widespread. Some people, believe this can happen maybe in a year or two. Some people will think it will never happen in a lifetime. Mm-hmm. But regardless when it's going to happen, I think there will be always some leading AI organization like in UK DeepMind, right? Google DeepMind, and also in Silicon Valley OpenAI. And then also many universities, they're pushing the edge, and there are these brilliant researchers moving towards artificial general intelligence. On the other side, I think if you look at entrepreneurs, and companies, innovators, they don't need to wait for when the AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, coming, because the narrow intelligence is already very powerful. Mm. And if you look at all the investment by companies and countries, and a lot of area can be replaced and transformed. And so that's where the economic power right now is in applying these narrow intelligence into applications where it can boost productivity, reduce costs, and improve, convenience. I think that's humongous economic power there for organizations, countries, and including individuals to really go after in the next decade. Yeah.
Got it. Dickie, I mean, you're an expert, of course, in the telecom world, and I see particularly AI having applications in, for example, driverless cars, which is also enabled by 5G technology. Any thoughts on how quickly we're going to see some of these AI technologies, really cool AI technologies, rolled out in terms of changing the way that we live our lives? Thoughts on that?
I just follow what Arthur and Chenyang just discussed, right? I would consider like cloud computing, AI is the enabling technology, right? There are single enabling technologies, cloud computing, like AI, IoT, all these things. But the more interesting things coming out is in the intersection of these technologies. For example, if you combine things like 5G telecom infrastructure, the arrival of this, which has like 20 times more speed, can be 20 times more quicker than the 4G. And there are many things will be possible, like autonomous driving. And I can explain a little bit about one application in the intersection, which is very interesting.
Yeah, go on.
Like in the area of VR, AR. In the past, we need to rely on the headsets to do the rendering, right? So we need a very heavy and very expensive, very powerful access device to do this kind of intensive processing. But by the availability of 5G and also by the cloud computing backend platform, all these things can be done on the backend, right? Because of the throughput, the pipe is much quicker. So the intersection of technologies, including the telecommunication infrastructure, will be very, very important to enable all these vertical applications, be they autonomous driving, be they VR, AR, or medical applications. Of course, AI also play a very important role.
Got it. And what's your best guess, if you like, about how soon this autonomous driving technology really is sufficiently powerful and successful, effective for us to actually have driverless cars on our roads? I mean, obviously there are tests underway in many places, but as actually a day-to-day thing, is this going to be in the next 10 years, for example?
I tend to assume AI is not coming that soon. Maybe very different from Chenyang's view. Yeah, I tend to believe AI will arrive step by step, right? In some application areas,
Yeah.
and in some smaller applications, smaller vertical niche applications.
Yeah.
Of course, we all have big ideas about the autonomous driving, like Google, Baidu all invest huge amount of money, right? And we have high expectations. But there are many other things which impact autonomous driving. It's not only the technology itself.
That's right.
There are also the legal side, right? The insurance side,
Yeah.
right? The regulation side. There are many things need to happen, right? Before all this can happen. But I'm sure technology will advance quite quickly, but not overnight, right? Not overnight.
That's right.
Not next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it is very clear, isn't it, that the technological problem is going to be surmounted at some point, but then the legal and behavior and almost like political challenges of taking entire cities and closing them off to, regular cars and having only driverless ones, that's a long way away. So
even insurance companies will face lots of challenge.
Absolutely.
By this.
Very good. So look, there's so much we want to talk about in this relatively short time. I'm going to switch to the next round of questions that we discussed in advance. And this is really the China-specific part of the story. So look, I only found out about this, a couple of days ago, but the new infrastructure initiative in China, Arthur, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what that is, and then perhaps the other panelists could comment upon it.
Sure. Actually, we can see that the global economy is heavily impacted by this pandemic. Many countries are taking different measures, trying to boost their economy and create jobs. China economy is also heavily impacted. The first quarter, the China GDP was a negative 6.8%, but we still confident about the long-term development of China's. This new infrastructure initiative is a key to boost the Chinese economies. It's different from a traditional one. The new one is mainly digital, including a trillion investment in the big data centers, the 5G network, the artificial intelligence and the industrial internet and other modern infrastructures. So we believe it will be the critical engine driving the economic growth. But its importance is not limited to that. At the same time, it drives the quantity of the economic growth. It also increases the quality of the growth. It will driving by digital innovations, and it will help China to accelerate the digital transformation across all the levels, including the companies, the industries, and the entire economies. It's a good news for people working in the tech industry, meaning many opportunities. It will also create more job and opportunity for other industries. So, and also enable more people to enjoy the benefit of the technologies. I think Chenyang and Dickie will have a more perspective and angles on this topic.
Yeah. And again, we'll keep the same order. Chenyang, I mean, you live in Silicon Valley, but obviously you've got a long background in China as well. From where you sit today, how do you see China's position in the world, in terms of technological innovation? I can obviously see some areas where China is now really in quite a leading position, but Silicon Valley may well argue with that. How do you see this sort of tussle between China and Silicon Valley for tech leadership?
Right. I have a startup actually in Guangzhou on medical imaging AI. And so I've been traveling there very often last few years. And I have to say that the perception about China, and there's still a lot of people in US, thinking China is a copycat, and then, they're, low wage, workers. I think that is far from the truth. And China has advanced tremendously and has moved to one of the first leading digital economy and cashless country. And so I think from that point of view, the entrepreneurship and the innovation in China, I think in the last 5 years has accelerated tremendously. I'll just give you a personal story. One of the a son of a good investor friend of mine, and then he is American and was born here in the Valley. And then after college, he went to China. He did a 1 year internship at one of the big four companies in China, in Beijing. And then while he was there for several months, and then almost a year, he told his parents and later told me that he felt Silicon Valley compared to China is too slow. Right? If you have a youngster from Silicon Valley and then thinking China is faster, I think we better believe in that. And that's also coincide with my observation as well. With the famous 9 and 6 working hours there. Obviously, there's some dark side of working that long, life-work balance, but nevertheless, China moving at tremendous speed in innovation, particularly on the digital economy side. But with that said, I do think in China, the applied technology, this really from two perspectives. From one side, it's from applied technology. I do think China has produced more and more applied engineers and researchers that could really translate that to something that make a difference in our daily life. For example, taking AI as example, the growth in AI application in China is astronomical. It's pretty incredible. But on the other side, I do worry about China in terms of fundamental science, and then research is still lagging behind Europe and US, and quality-wise. And then some of the metric in China, I think, is still incentivized research is still questionable, and a lot of debates. I do think that pieces still need to be addressed, and unfortunately, it's not an easy problem. And if it didn't advance fast enough with the current kind of decoupling between US and China, and then I think this will go on for a while, and this could be worrisome to be a stumbling block for the future China innovation growth. So that's really my take on that.
Got it. And just one quick follow-up. You only briefly mentioned Europe. We kind of take it for granted that somehow Europe is not leading in these technological innovations, and that's not a great position to be in, me sitting here in London, of course. Do we see any glimmers of hope, as it were, in terms of tech innovation in Europe?
I headed Siemens Technology Ventures for ETS in the Silicon Valley, but really it's working for the globe. So I traveled to Europe quite a bit, and then I also went to UK a number of times and speak at the universities there and companies. I have a huge respect for the innovation in Europe, and then I think there's a tremendous increase in startup activity in UK, in France and Germany and other countries, and innovation as well. But I think fundamentally the challenge with Europe going forward is the silo, right? And with Britain leaving the EU, it's already, and then the language, the market is very inhomogeneous, unlike in US, and in China. I think that is going to be the major issue as we move to digital economy and moving to what I call the knowledge-centric economy that's powered by AI, which is very data hungry. And then when your data cannot be disseminated, in a homogeneous manner, very quick way at scale, and you will be at a disadvantage. And I do think that's a major concern. But how that could be addressed, I trust Europe, the collective wisdom maybe will figure out a way. So. Well,
my quick thoughts on this, of course, as a European is that, there's lots of good research happens in Europe. And historically, we've just done a terrible job of really commercializing that in the way that others have. And I like to see that I'd like to say that there's signs of progress. And there's all the big Silicon Valley VCs are now putting regional offices into London and Stockholm and Berlin and places like that. And the actual level of venture investing in startups in Europe is healthy. It's not what it is in the Valley, but it is healthy. So I'm always an optimist on this. Dickie, your thought?
By the way, I may just want to add a quick thought, just trigger it. With US and China is going to be coupling for a while, and regardless, who is going to be the president, in the fall. I think this could be an opportunity for Europe, right? Because China is shut off of the US and now it's looking Europe, and Europe, China, they're, if you figure out a way to collaborate in a more constructive way, it could be a golden decade, 5 years ahead. And then where Europe could tap into the China market like US used to, and that could be giving a good growth and biggest market on the planet for Europe to play. And then while advancing the local regional economy as well. So just a thought. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. And certainly sitting here in the UK, one of the benefits, there's lots of downsides to Brexit, but at least the UK government now recognizes the importance of bringing people in from all over the world. And any student who comes to London, to the UK, is allowed to stay in the UK for 2 years before they have to leave. And that's a hugely beneficial thing. And of course, America is not being quite as generous on that. Dickie, your thoughts on the whole sort of, battle for global dominance in technology?
Yeah, I actually quite agree with what Chenyang just said. You just said, Europe should be able to play a role under the situation, the trade war between China and US, right? I used to work for European companies like Ericsson, Nokia for almost 20 years. And I'm sure by leveraging the new infrastructure initiative, which Chinese government call it, and I like the Benson from previous panel said, he called it digital infrastructure, right? So I have been thinking about which companies or which categories of companies are going to benefit from this, right? So like the network equipment providers, the infrastructure companies, like including European companies, right? Nokia, Ericsson,
exactly.
And of course, Huawei also are going to benefit a lot from the network equipment infrastructures, and also another category of companies, like the data center providers, mainly the Chinese, like China Telecom, right? They are going to benefit a lot. And also the network operators, I mean the telecom network operators like China Mobile, they will benefit later. But the last but not the least category is companies like VMware, right? They are the cloud technology providers, and also the cloud service providers like Tencent, like Amazon, like Microsoft, like RD Cloud. All these companies are going to benefit hugely from this new infrastructure initiative, or we can call it digital infrastructure initiative.
Yeah, good. Look, we have got maybe 10 minutes left if we ran over a little bit, and I've got a lot of questions, so I'll start asking some of these questions, and obviously we'll figure out which of you, the panelists, answer them. The first question, and maybe this is going to Dickie first, I'm not sure. Are business school degrees necessary for a career in technology? Dickie, you obviously have spent a lot of time at business school. What's your thought on that?
Well, I used to be not that positive for business school students to work for the tech companies, but now I totally changed my mind. I'm very positive. Yeah. So you should not, of course, for the tech companies, you should not employ the business school students to do R&D, of course, logically, right? You employ people from the engineering schools.
Yeah.
But for other areas, like, for example, for the areas like business development, for strategy, for merger and acquisition, for money raising, right? Even for sales and marketing, you do need business school graduates to help you to do that, right? And so there are 3 categories of companies which really need the business school students. First category is the tech conglomerates, right? Like in China, like BAT, right? Like even Didi, Toutiao, these companies. And globally, like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, all need business school students to do the job category that I just described. Another type of company is the fast-growing or early-stage companies, right? They need people who know entrepreneurship, who know innovation in a structured way, not only trial and error, right? Yeah. If you know entrepreneurship, you know innovation, which you learn from business school in a more structured way, that is very helpful. And another category of companies is the consulting companies, and also the PE and VCs. Anyway, you need to work in the tech sector, right? If you employ business school graduates and with some technical background, or you learn later, right? So these people are going to be very, very helpful.
Good. And
I have to jump in, actually.
Go on, Arthur. Go.
Yes, we do need experts with a business background in the tech industry, because as we discussed early, the world is changing in terms of the technology innovations, the mindset of our customers, their buying behavior, and the business environment. So you will see, the cycle of a technology refresh getting shorter and shorter from years to months, even the week.
Yeah.
We definitely need to innovate the management concept and also the business management methodology to deal with these kind of situations. So that's why we need people with all this kind of knowledge to join to help us. This definitely necessary. Sometimes, you will find that the business has a much income with the tech industry. For example, you may find some very popular concept in the software and application development, like agile development, microservices, containers, and MVP. And they are all listed in some influential business and innovation books, such as 0 to 1, Lean Startup, and many others. So this is definitely we need.
Well, I'm reassured. Chenyang, I've got a very different question for you, if I may, because we are running out of time. I've got this one question and then one final question for all the panelists. Chenyang, the question is, will we see technology standards decoupling as we see US and China's economies sort of decouple a little bit? It's an interesting question. I mean, do we see a convergence or a divergence in terms of technology standards?
I think this is yin and yang of technology evolution. And when technology is new, and there's always a divergence, because you need to encourage exploration, experimentation, and execution to understand its full benefit and risk. But then once this is mature enough, and then you will see convergence, integration, and then to bring greater benefits and impact. So right now, I see particularly, the last 10-year trends, if you look at AI, IoT, cloud, robotics, and sensors, many of these, will be converging. But the new one, like 5G, blockchain, and many other like material science, those could still be explored standalone initially, but then once they show it's can be working at scale, it will be brought back to the convergence very quickly. I do think the 5G will be a game changer, and to be bring back to the convergence.
Good. Look, I've got one more question and then we really are out of time. So it's a nice question. It's a difficult question. It links the trend towards AI and robotics, which of course a lot of people are predicting is going to reduce the number of jobs available, because of course it puts some people out of work. That trend, coupled with COVID-19 and of course the mass unemployment that we've got today, and this worry that of course even as we open the economies up, that unemployment problem will still remain. I mean, this is painting a fairly gloomy picture of the future in terms of employment, in terms of the number of jobs that there are out there. Would any of the panelists like to comment on that, to see if you can see a silver line on this cloud, or whether it's actually quite a gloomy story? Who wants to go first?
Maybe I'll go first. I think there's definitely a lot of worry. You see a lot of reports to the government and about the job loss and replacement, and you see that on the headline news every day. So it is very worrisome, and but there are also people who are optimistic, thinking there's in the history of humankind, this is not the first time we have technology revolution and replacing jobs. Every time when jobs replace, new jobs get created. But I do believe that scenario also should be careful. And then I think we need to really watch the real job loss. The question is if the speed is enough to replace it. But I do think there was one dimension, which is really the human care versus the machine care of the society. I do think in today's world, people are so busy, and they don't provide the care. Taking doctor as example, when was the last time you can have a conversation with doctor, right, in the doctor visit? You basically treat it like a machine. A few minutes, you get dismissed, right, because they are overwhelmed with the patient to see. Now with AI pick up the productivity, I do think the human care dimension will be significantly strengthened, and I think we can get more care there. I think that's where the job increase will go, and then will grow very quickly. But this is a hard question, and so I think I would rather encourage AI innovators, entrepreneurs to build their AI for good, right? To keep that consequence in mind, and I think to do it in a responsible way, that's very important too.
Perfect. Final comments. Keep it short, please, Arthur and Dickie. Anything on that question?
Yes, I can go first. I've been in the technology industry for almost 35 years. So what we have been doing is automation, right? No matter it's AI, mobile internet, cloud computing, anything, right? So it's all about automation. So I tend to be very pessimistic about the disruption of technologies, right? On the one way, we kill jobs, right? We disrupt industries, but on the other hand, we always create new jobs you cannot imagine, right? Every 10 years, there are huge disruptions all the way. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, fair enough. Arthur, any last thoughts?
Yes, the technology grows exponentially. Maybe we can now use our linear knowledge and experience to judge and predict the futures. Furthermore, the rule is changing. We need to adapt it. For example, a very smart, success person in the modern world cannot survive even 10 minutes in the Stone Age because the muscle strength and the running speed is a key in that time. So that's why we need to change ourselves to build our agility, resilience, adaptive capability. So for the futures, AI definitely will be the key technology in the future. So we need to change ourselves. That's important.
We need to change ourselves. Yeah, and then let me just add one final comment before we finish. I mean, and we've all kind of lived through this last 6 or 7 weeks, sort of fascinated by the social experiment that we've been going on. And certainly from my point of view, both working at London Business School and talking to people from many other companies, is that this forced lockdown has actually enabled huge innovations in a lot of things, which are very progressive innovations. And I think we've got to be very kind of happy that those innovations have had an opportunity to take place, because there had been an awful lot of resistance to using technology to make the world a better place. And suddenly all that resistance has fallen away. So obviously it's a grim time, but we can always find some of these silver linings. So I'm going to close here. Thank you very much to Arthur, to Chenyang, and to Dickie for a fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoyed it.